That night, when the bedroom door slammed with such a crash that the picture frame fell off the wall and shattered, I knew I had reached my limit. My daughter's words still rang like daggers in my ears. "Your house smells like failure, Mum. It smells like people who haven't achieved anything in life, and I'm sick of it. I'm going to live with my mother-in-law. At least she's rich." I stood there, frozen in the hallway, listening to the sound of the car driving away. My legs were shaking, but my heart was even more broken than the cracked glass on the floor. But before I continue, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and write in the comments, where are you watching this video from? We love knowing how far our stories are reaching. My name is Rebecca. I am 63 years old, and this is the story of how my only daughter scorned me in the worst possible way, but ended up discovering that underestimating a mother can be the biggest mistake anyone can commit in life. I was always one of those women who faced the world with her own two hands. Since my husband Robert left us, when Jamie was only 8 years old, I took on the bills, the responsibilities, and the dreams we had built together, all by myself. It wasn't easy. I worked as a domestic worker for years, leaving the house while it was still dark and returning when the stars were already in the sky. My hands, which used to be soft, as Jamie always commented when she was a little girl, became rough, marked by the heavy work and the cleaning chemicals. Our house was small, yes, 2 bedrooms, a cramped kitchen, a bathroom that always needed some repair. The cheap tile floor had a few cracks that I covered with colourful rugs that I made myself during my rare hours off. The walls had needed a fresh coat of paint for years, but there was always a more urgent bill: school supplies that Jamie needed, new sneakers because the old ones were worn out. Even so, I was proud of our little corner. It was clean, tidy, and had been earned with the sweat of my brow. Every piece of furniture in that house, every object, told a story of sacrifice and overcoming. The old refrigerator I bought on 12 payments. The second-hand sofa I refurbished, changing the fabric and fixing the foam with my own hands. The kitchen table I had sanded and painted, transforming a discarded piece of furniture into something beautiful again. Jamie grew up in that reality. At first, she seemed to understand our limitations. When her friends had expensive toys and she didn't, I would patiently explain that our money needed to be used for more important things. "One day, honey, we're going to have more," I'd tell her, and she would accept it with that little girl's smile that doesn't yet know the malice of the world. Things began to change when she entered her teenage years. The desire to have what others had grew stronger. The comments started subtly. "Mum, Alex's house has 3 stories," or "Veronica's mum bought her a new cell phone." I'd swallow hard and try to explain our situation, but increasingly I saw that look of disappointment on her face. It was in college that everything completely worsened. Jamie got a partial scholarship to study business administration, and I worked myself to the bone to pay the rest of the tuition. I took on extra cleaning jobs on the weekends. I accepted any work that came my way. There were days when I ate only bread and margarine, so that she could have money for transportation and for her lunch at the university. I remember one day when she came home with bright eyes. She had been invited to a party at the house of a rich classmate. I spent money I didn't have to buy her a nice dress, one of those she had seen in the window displays at the shopping malls. When she left that night, beautiful as always, I felt a mixture of pride and apprehension. Something told me that this new world opening up to her could separate us. It was at that party that she met Mark, the son of a successful real estate businesswoman. He was studying at the same university, but in the economics program. When Jamie brought him home to meet me for the first time, I immediately noticed the judgmental look he cast toward our modest living room. He sat on the very edge of the sofa, as if he were afraid of being contaminated by our simplicity, and when I offered him a coffee, he rejected it politely, but with an expression that said more than words ever could. Still, I welcomed the young man with all the manners my mother taught me. After all, if my daughter liked him, I would make the effort to like him too. Deep down, I wished he would see past the appearances and value the incredible girl I had raised. Over the following months, Jamie's behavior gradually changed. She began to spend more time at Mark's house, only coming home to sleep, and sometimes not even then. When she was home, she complained about everything, about the noise of the old washing machine, the smell of the cleaning product I used, the fan that rattled because one of the blades was bent. I tried to talk to her, tried to make her see the value of simple things, but it was as if we were speaking different languages. The sweet girl who once sang with me while I washed the dishes had turned into a stranger who barely looked me in the eye. That was when I met Mrs. Elizabeth, Mark's mother. She showed up at our house one Sunday afternoon, driving an imported car that completely clashed with our simple street. She got out of the car like someone stepping onto dangerous territory, looking around suspiciously. She wore jewelry that, I was sure, was worth more than everything I owned. Jamie greeted her with an enthusiasm she hadn't shown me in a long time. They talked like old friends, discussing brands, travel, and expensive restaurants that I only knew by hearsay. I stayed there, in the kitchen, making coffee, and listening to every word, feeling smaller and more insignificant with every passing moment. When I finally joined them in the living room, Mrs. Elizabeth barely concealed her discomfort. She looked at my work-marked hands, and then at Jamie's perfectly manicured nails, and something in her gaze suggested she was assessing my worth. Apparently not much. "Rebecca, right? Jamie has told me so much about you. It must be difficult raising a daughter alone, and especially under these conditions." She made a vague gesture that encompassed our entire living room. It wasn't a question. It was a statement disguised as sympathy. I swallowed my wounded pride and replied politely, "Yes, it has its challenges, but Jamie has always been a source of great pride for me." She smiled, that kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. Of course, of course. She's a special girl. She deserves the best in life, don't you think?" In that moment, I saw Jamie look at Mrs. Elizabeth with admiration, the kind of look she used to give me. And I understood, with painful clarity, that I was losing my daughter not only to Mark, but to an entire world that I could never offer her. Mrs. Elizabeth's visits became more frequent. She always brought expensive gifts for Jamie, designer clothes, imported perfumes, and branded bags. With each gift, I saw my daughter pulling further away from me and the life we had built together. It was during one of those visits that Mrs. Elizabeth dropped the news. "Jamie, dear, I've already spoken with Mark, and we've decided. Why don't you come live with us? We have a guest room that no one uses. It's large and has its own bathroom. You'd be closer to the university, and you'd save on transportation." My heart sank in my chest as I waited for Jamie's answer. She hesitated for a moment, glanced at me quickly, and then smiled at Mrs. Elizabeth. "That would be wonderful. But first, I need to talk to my mum." Mrs. Elizabeth shrugged, as if my opinion were a mere formality. "Of course, dear. Think about it. The offer still stands." That night, after Mrs. Elizabeth left, I tried to talk to Jamie. I sat down next to her on the bed and asked if she was seriously considering the proposal. "Mum, you have to understand. Their house is 10 minutes from the university. I would save 2 hours of bus travel a day, time I could use to study more." "But this is your house, Jamie, your home." She looked around, at the peeling walls, the antique dresser, and sighed. "Yes, I know, but maybe it's time to experience other environments." The chosen word was like a slap in the face. Environments. As if our house, our home, were just an environment. and an unsuitable one at that. That night, I cried quietly in my room, trying not to make a sound so she wouldn't hear me. I knew I was being selfish, wanting to keep her with me, but I also knew that Mrs. Elizabeth wasn't offering a room out of kindness. There was something predatory about that woman, a desire to rip Jamie from her roots, to make her forget where she came from. In the following weeks, Jamie became increasingly distant. She went days without coming home, and when she did, we barely talked. I saw her packing a few belongings, little by little taking her things to Mrs. Elizabeth's house, as if she were testing the waters, seeing what it would be like to live there. I tried everything to win my daughter back. I made her favorite dishes. I bought her a small gift with the money I had saved to fix the showerhead. I tried to start conversations about old times, but it was as if there was an invisible wall between us, made of shame and resentment. One day I got home early from work. I was exhausted, with a sore back after cleaning 3 different houses. All I wanted was a hot shower and a few hours of rest before Jamie arrived from the university. But when I opened the door, I heard voices coming from her room. I crept closer and stopped near the slightly ajar door. Jamie was on the phone, probably with Mark, and she didn't know I was home. I know, she was saying, laughing. It's horrible here. You can't imagine how hard it is to sleep on that old mattress. And the bathroom? Oh my God. It has mold in the corners that won't come off for anything. I think I'll have to burn all my clothes when I move out completely because the smell of this place is starting to cling to them. I froze, unable to move, unable to breathe. Every word was a stab. The smell of this place was the smell of the cheap laundry detergent I used to wash our clothes. The smell of the cleaning product I religiously used every day to keep our house clean, even with all the difficulties. I'm embarrassed, you know? The other day, Danielle asked me where I lived, and I gave her a fake address. I didn't want anyone from the university to know I live here. I felt the hot tears running down my face, but I didn't make a sound. I slowly backed away from the door and left the house. I walked aimlessly through the neighborhood streets, trying to process the pain I felt. My own daughter was ashamed of me, of the house I had achieved with so much sacrifice, of the life I had built for the 2 of us. When I returned, hours later, I pretended I hadn't heard anything. I greeted Jamie normally. I asked about her day. I served dinner as if everything were fine. But inside, something had changed. A seed of resentment had been planted, and I didn't know how to stop it from growing. In the following weeks, Jamie was increasingly absent. She slept at home only 1 or 2 times per week, always with that expression of someone making a great sacrifice. I watched, helpless, as she drifted further and further away. And then came that night. I was in the living room, watching a cooking show on the old television we had, when I heard the noise. First, the front door slammed shut. Then, heavy footsteps in the hallway. And then, the sound of drawers opening and closing violently in Jamie's room. I got up, my heart racing, and went there. I stopped at the doorway and saw my daughter throwing clothes into 2 large open suitcases on the bed. Her movements were frantic, angry, as if each piece of clothing represented a piece of the past she wanted to tear away from herself. "Jamie, what's going on?" I asked, my voice betraying my nervousness. She turned toward me, and the look she gave me made me take a step back. It was a look of pure contempt, as if I was something disgusting she had found under her shoe. "I'm leaving, Mum, once and for all." "But why? Did something happen?" She let out a dry, humorless laugh. "Life happened, Mum. I woke up. I looked at this place, this house, and I realized I can't take it anymore. Your house smells like failure, Mum. It smells like people who haven't achieved anything in life." The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. I tried to breathe, but it was as if all the air had been sucked out of the room. Jamie, this house is our home. It's everything I managed to provide for you, with a lot of hard work. She rolled her eyes, impatient. And that's what you don't understand, Mum. I deserve more than this. I deserve more than this falling apart house, this humble neighborhood, this mediocre life that you chose for both of us. That I chose, I repeated, incredulous. You think I chose to become a widow at 35? That I chose to raise you alone, without anyone's help? That I chose to clean other people's houses to be able to give you food and an education? Other people went through difficulties and succeeded in life, she retorted, continuing to throw clothes into the suitcase. Look at Mark's mum. She also started from the bottom, and today she has a company, a wonderful house, an imported car. You got complacent, Mum. You settled for this life of defeat. Every word was a stab in my chest. My own daughter calling me a defeated person, a failure. The girl for whom I had sacrificed everything, for whom I had given every drop of my sweat and every piece of my heart. I'm going to live with Mrs. Elizabeth and Mark, she continued, closing one of the suitcases forcefully. It's a real house there, a house of winners. There I can receive my friends without dying of embarrassment. There I can finally be who I was born to be. And who were you born to be, Jamie? I asked, my voice low, almost a whisper. She stopped for a moment, looked me up and down, and replied coldly, Someone better than you, that's for sure. It was at that moment that something inside me broke. It wasn't just the broken heart of a rejected mother. It was as if a dam had burst, releasing years of repressed resentment, unrecognized sacrifices, unrequited love. Go, I said simply. She seemed surprised by my reaction. Talvez she expected tears, pleas, desperate attempts to make her stay. What? You heard me. Get out of my house. If it's so terrible, if it smells so much like failure, then leave. Now. She finished closing the second suitcase, looking at me with a mixture of surprise and contempt. That's exactly what I'm going to do, and you can be sure I won't be back. I watched in silence while she dragged the suitcases down the hall. At the living room door, she still turned around, as if waiting for me to change my mind at the last moment, to beg her to stay. But I did nothing of the sort. I stood there, rooted in the middle of the hallway, feeling the tears silently run down my face. When the door slammed shut, the picture frame with our photo fell off the wall and shattered on the floor. It was an old photo from when she was about 10 years old. We were on the beach, hugging, smiling at the camera. It was our only trip together, the result of a whole year of saving every cent. I crouched down and picked up the photo among the pieces of glass. I looked at those smiling faces and wondered when everything had started to go wrong. At what point my sweet girl had turned into that stranger, full of bitterness and scorn. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the kitchen, staring into space, mentally reviewing every moment of our life together, searching to understand where I had gone wrong. Had I been too permissive? Or maybe too strict? Should I have worked even harder? Made even greater sacrifices to give her the life of luxury she so desired? But at some point in the early morning, between one cup of tea and the next, something shifted inside me. A small but firm voice began to make itself heard. A voice that said I hadn't done anything wrong, that I had always given my best. That the problem wasn't me, or our house, or our simple life. The problem was that Jamie had been seduced by empty values, by appearances, by a distorted idea of what really matters in life. And it was there, in that small kitchen she so despised, that I made a decision. I wouldn't wallow in regret. I wouldn't drown in tears of self-pity. It was time to think about myself, for the first time in many years. It was time to show my daughter, and especially myself, that a simple house is not a house of failures, that calloused hands from work are not the hands of defeated people, that a modest life, lived with dignity and honesty, is a life worth living. When the sun came up, I already had a plan that would change everything, not just for me, but for Jamie too. What she didn't know was that by slamming the door on her way out, she had awakened a strength in me that I didn't even know I possessed. And that strength was going to surprise everyone, even myself. That morning, I got up earlier than usual. Despite the sleepless night, I didn't feel tired. It was as if a new energy was flowing through my veins, fueled not by rage or resentment, but by a cold, calculated determination that I had never experienced before. The first thing I did, Shane, was call all the houses where I worked as a domestic worker. One by one, I explained that I needed a break, that I was going through personal issues. Most understood, although some employers made it clear that they couldn't guarantee my position when I returned. I didn't care. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about security, stability, or survival. I was thinking about transformation. Next, I grabbed all the savings I had put away over the years. It wasn't much, just a few $1,000s that I saved cent by cent for emergencies. I always thought that money would be for a serious illness, a major house problem, or even to help Jamie if she needed it. I never imagined that I would use it for myself, for my own silent revolution. With the money in my hands, I left the house with a clear purpose. My first stop was at a home improvement store. I bought paint, putty, sandpaper, brushes, rollers, everything I needed to transform the peeling walls of my house. I chose light and bright colors, a soft yellow for the living room, an aqua green for the kitchen, a serene blue for the bedrooms, colors that brought life, that drove away the feeling of defeat that Jamie had pointed out. On the way back home, I stopped by a used furniture store that I knew well. The owner, Mr. Frank, was a friendly man who always greeted me when I passed by on my way to work. He recognized me immediately. "Mrs. Rebecca, what a pleasant surprise. Did you come looking for something specific?" I looked around the store, at the furniture of different styles and eras, and smiled. "Actually, I came to see if you'd be interested in buying some of my furniture." He seemed surprised. "Are you moving?" "No, Mr. Frank, I'm renovating." I explained what I wanted to do. Sell some old furniture, the coffee table, some chairs, the worn-out sofa, to buy different pieces that would give my house a new look. He agreed to come by the next day to assess what I had to sell. Back at my house, I started the work immediately. I took all the pictures off the walls, moved the furniture away from the center of the room, and covered the floor with old newspapers. It wasn't the first time I had painted a house. I had done it a few times to supplement my income, but it was the first time I was doing it for myself, for the simple pleasure of renovating the space that was mine. I worked the whole day, stopping only to eat a quick sandwich for lunch. By the time night fell, the living room already had the first coat of paint. The smell of fresh paint filled the house, a smell that for me didn't represent poverty or failure, as Jamie had said, but renewal, a new beginning. I slept exhausted that night, but with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. For the first time since Jamie left, I didn't cry before going to sleep. I didn't replay her cruel words in my head. I simply closed my eyes and slept, wrapped in physical tiredness and the certainty that I was on the right path. The following days followed a similar pattern. I got up early, worked on renovating the house until late, and collapsed into bed, exhausted but satisfied. Mr. Frank came, as promised, and took away some of my old furniture, leaving in return an amount that, added to my savings, would allow me to buy a few new pieces. 1 week after Jamie had left, the transformation of the house was already visible. The walls had new and vibrant colours. The few pieces of furniture that remained had been sanded and painted. The floor had received a deep cleaning and a new shine. The old curtains had been replaced by others I bought on sale, made of a light fabric that let the sun stream in freely. But I knew that the true transformation needed to be more profound. It wasn't enough to change the appearance of the house. I needed to change myself, the way I saw myself, the way I faced life. It was with this in mind that I took another important decision. Instead of returning to work as a domestic worker, I decided to use the rest of my savings to take a quick sewing course. I always had skill with my hands, and on the few occasions I had time to sew something, a patchwork quilt, a simple dress for Jamie, I felt genuine satisfaction. The course lasted only 1 month, 4 hours a day. To cover the basic expenses during that period, I sold some small pieces of jewellery I had kept. A small gold necklace I received from my parents when I turned 15. A pair of earrings that Robert gave me when we started dating. It wasn't easy to part with those memories, but I understood that sometimes it's necessary to let go of the past to embrace the future. The course was a revelation. I discovered that I had a natural talent for sewing, especially for creating decorative pieces for the house. Pillows, throws, curtains. The teacher, Mrs. Carroll, a woman in her 70s with nimble hands and discerning eyes, quickly noticed my skill. "Rebecca, you have a gift," she told me one day, observing a pillow I had just finished with a geometric pattern I created myself. "Have you ever thought about doing this professionally?" The idea had never occurred to me. Sewing had always been just a pastime, something I did out of necessity or in rare moments of leisure. "Do you think I could do it?" I asked, feeling insecure. Mrs. Carroll smiled. "I'm sure of it. Your pieces have personality, they have life, and there's a growing market for quality crafts, you know? People who are tired of buying industrialized, soulless things." That conversation planted a seed in my mind. In the following days, while I continued transforming my house, I began to research the topic. I visited craft fairs, talked to other artisans, and joined social media groups dedicated to the subject. I discovered that Mrs. Carroll was right. There was a market for the kind of work I could do. At the same time, I hadn't heard from Jamie. Part of me expected her to call, to ask to come back, to regret the harsh words she had said. Another part knew that wouldn't happen so soon. Her pride, and mine, which had awakened after years of sleep, created an invisible barrier between us. Instead of letting myself be consumed by thinking about it, I channeled all my energy into my transformation project. When the sewing course ended, I already had a clear plan in mind. I would use the room that used to be Jamie's as my workshop. I would transform that space, which now represented abandonment and rejection, into a place of creation, renewal, and life. With the help of Mr. Frank, who sold me a used workbench at a friendly price, and Mrs. Carroll, who gave me various fabric scraps to get me started, I set up my small workspace. I bought a used but well-maintained sewing machine and began creating my first pieces destined for sale. At first, it was difficult. I worked long hours perfecting every detail, every stitch, every choice of color and texture. Sometimes I was so absorbed in the work that I forgot to eat, to rest. But it was a different kind of tiredness than I felt when I worked as a domestic worker. It was a tiredness that came with satisfaction, with fulfillment. My first sale happened almost by chance. A neighbor, Mrs. Lois, came to visit to see the changes I had made to the house. News of the transformation had already spread through the neighborhood, and she was delighted with a pillow that was on the sofa. "How lovely, Rebecca! What a beautiful thing! Where did you buy it?" I made it, I replied, feeling a mixture of pride and shyness. Seriously? She picked up the pillow, analyzing the details, the perfect finish, the unique pattern. Rebecca, this could be sold in a boutique. Have you thought about marketing it? That's how I received my first order. 3 pillows for Mrs. Lois's newly renovated living room. She paid in advance, which allowed me to buy more materials, expanding my possibilities. When I delivered the order, she was so satisfied that she showed it to other friends, who also became interested. Within a few weeks, I already had a small client base. It was Mrs. Carroll who encouraged me to take the next step, create a social media page to showcase my work. Nowadays, that's how people find quality artisanal products, she explained. Since I wasn't very familiar with technology, I asked Mrs. Lois's daughter, a young woman in her 20s who understood the subject, for help. The page Art at Home by Rebecca was born one Sunday afternoon, 3 months after Jamie had slammed the door on her way out. The first photos were simple, taken with my old cell phone, but they showed the essence of my work. Unique pieces, made with care and love, that transformed ordinary spaces into special places. To my surprise, the page quickly began gaining followers. At first, they were just acquaintances, friends of friends, but soon the reach expanded. I started receiving messages from people in other neighborhoods, asking if I shipped to other regions of the city, wanting to know prices, deadlines, and customization options. 6 months after Jamie's departure, my life had completely changed. My house, once the target of my daughter's scorn and shame, was now my business card, my showroom. Customers came to me to see my work personally, to see how my creations looked in a real setting. And instead of shame, I felt immense pride in opening the door and inviting those people in. The room that had been Jamie's now was a complete workshop, with shelves full of colourful fabrics, a larger and better cutting table, a new sewing machine, bought with the profit from sales. The walls were decorated with fabric art that I had made myself, each representing a different phase of my journey of self-discovery. Financially, I was in a much better situation than when I worked as a domestic worker. I wasn't rich, not by a long shot, but for the first time in life, I didn't need to count every single cent to make it to the end of the month. I could afford small luxuries, a dinner out once in a while, a haircut at a better salon, a new pair of shoes, not because the old ones were worn out, but simply because I wanted them. More important than that, however, was how I felt inside. The insecure and submissive woman who silently endured insults and humiliations, who lived only to serve others, had been left behind. In her place emerged a Rebecca who respected herself, who was proud of her own work, who knew her worth. It was at this point in my life, when I had finally found my way, that Jamie came back. It was a Saturday afternoon. I was finishing a quilt commissioned by a client from a luxurious neighborhood in the city when the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, there she was, my daughter, but so different from the arrogant young woman who had left slamming the door months before. Jamie was thinner, with visible dark circles under her eyes. Her hair, which was always her pride, seemed dull, lifeless. But it was the look that struck me the most. The contempt, the superiority, were gone. In their place, I saw uncertainty, perhaps regret, and definitely surprise at seeing the changes to the house's exterior. "Mum," she said, her voice trembling, Can I come in?" I hesitated for a moment. Part of me wanted to hug her, tell her everything would be fine, that she would always be welcome. But another part, the new Rebecca who had learned to value herself, knew that things couldn't simply go back to the way they were, that we needed a frank conversation, with clear boundaries, with mutual respect. "You can," I finally replied, opening the door wider. But we have a lot to talk about. Her shock upon entering the house was visible. Her eyes scanned the living room, completely transformed. The vibrant coloured walls, the new furniture, my handcrafted creations, giving life and personality to the space that she had one day called stinky and a failure. "Oh my God, Mum, the house it's beautiful," she murmured, seeming genuinely surprised. "What happened here?" "A lot changed since you left, Jamie," I replied, gesturing toward the sofa for her to sit down. It was a new, comfortable sofa, covered by a throw blanket that I had made myself, in shades of blue and green that matched the walls perfectly. She sat on the edge, as if she wasn't sure what her place was there. For a moment, I remembered how Mark had sat in that exact position the first time he came to our house, as if he were afraid of being contaminated by our poverty. The irony was not lost on me. "Would you like some coffee?" I offered, more out of habit than anything else. She nodded, still looking around, taking in every detail of the transformation. In the kitchen, as I made the coffee, I took several deep breaths. I needed to remain calm, focused. I couldn't let emotions, the still not completely healed resentment, the hope of reconciliation, the wounded pride, dictate the tone of the conversation we were about to have. I returned to the living room with 2 cups of coffee, served in a set I had recently bought, simple but elegant. I sat in an armchair across from her. Then I began, after we took a few sips in silence. "What brings you here after all this time?" Jamie looked at the cup in her hands, as if searching for the right words in the bottom of the coffee. I'm not living with Mrs. Elizabeth and Mark anymore," she finally said, her voice almost a whisper. "What happened?" She looked up and I could see tears welling up. "Everything that seemed perfect was just a facade, Mum. The beautiful house, the expensive furniture, the imported car. All of that came with a price I hadn't imagined." She then told me how life at Mrs. Elizabeth's house had slowly turned into a nightmare, how the perfect mother-in-law had revealed herself to be a controlling, petty, and manipulative person, how Mark, who seemed so kind and loving, was actually a spoiled and immature man, incapable of making decisions without consulting his mother. "At first, everything seemed like a dream," Jamie explained, drying a tear. "The huge room, the bathroom with a whirlpool tub, the meals served like at a fancy restaurant. But soon, Mrs. Elizabeth started collecting payment for all of that. Not with money, but with other currencies. My freedom, my privacy, my dignity." She told me how Mrs. Elizabeth began controlling her schedule, questioning her clothes, criticizing the way she spoke, ate, and behaved. How Mark, instead of defending her, always sided with his mother, repeating that Jamie should be grateful for the opportunity to live in that refined environment. "And the worst part," she continued, her voice choked, "was when I discovered they were talking about you behind your back, laughing at your naivete, your complacency. That's when I realized what kind of people they really were." I listened everything in silence, without interrupting. Part of me felt a bitter satisfaction. Wasn't this what I had foreseen from the beginning? But another part ached for her, for the suffering I could see stamped on her face. "Last night, we had a big fight," she concluded. "Mrs. Elizabeth said I was ungrateful, that I had led her son astray, that I would never be good enough for their family. Why? Because I came from a family of losers." Her last words made my stomach clench. They were almost the same ones Jamie had used against me that night. "And what did you do?" I asked, keeping my voice calm despite the storm of emotions inside me. I told her she was wrong, that my mum wasn't a loser, that my mum had raised me alone, with dignity, with love, something she, with all the money in the world, hadn't been able to do with her own son. I was surprised by her words. I didn't expect that defense, not after everything she had said about me. Mark got furious, she continued. He said I had to choose between him and you, and that's when I realized I didn't have any choice to make. I had already chosen wrong once, when I left here the way I did. I wasn't going to commit the same mistake again. She looked at me directly, her eyes full of tears, but also a determination that reminded me, strangely, of myself. So I left, Mum. I took the little I had, and I left. I spent the night at a friend's house from college, and came straight here today. I understand if you don't want to take me back, after everything I said, how I treated you. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I needed to see you. I needed to tell you how sorry I am, how much I miss you, how much I miss our life together. I took a deep breath, feeling a whirlwind of emotions, relief, sadness, a lingering resentment, but also a tenderness that had never completely disappeared, no matter how much I tried to deny it. Jamie, I began, choosing my words with care. What you said to me that night hurt me deeply. They were words a mother never expects to hear from her own daughter, words that aren't easily erased. She lowered her head, tears now falling freely, but they were also words that made me wake up. I continued. That made me look at myself, at my life, and realize that I could do more, that I deserved more. Not a bigger house or expensive furniture or things like that, but respect, appreciation, personal fulfillment. I got up and walked to the window, looking out at the quiet street of our simple but dignified neighborhood. After you left, I could have drowned in self-pity, in resentment, but I decided to do things differently. I decided to transform the pain into fuel, the rejection into motivation. I told her then everything that had happened in the last few months. The sewing course, the first sales, the social media page, the customers who now came from various neighborhoods in the city, sometimes even from neighboring towns. I talked about my plans for the future, expanding the product line, maybe even opening a small shop one day. I discovered who I am, Jamie. I discovered my worth, my potential, and I owe that in part to you. Your painful departure ended up being the push I needed. She looked at me, surprised. You? You don't hate me? I shook my head, feeling a peace I hadn't expected to find at that moment. No, honey, I never hated you. It hurt, yes, a lot. But hate? No. But you are my daughter, my blood. Even in the most difficult moments, even when your words cut me like knives, I still loved you. I will always love you. I walked over and sat down beside her on the sofa. But loving doesn't mean allowing myself to be disrespected. It doesn't mean accepting any treatment, swallowing any humiliation. I learned that in the last few months, and it's a lesson I won't forget. I understand, she said, taking my hand. And I promise, Mum, I swear I will never treat you that way again. I learned the hard way that a house isn't just the place where you live. It's the place where you are truly loved, where you are accepted as you are. We stayed like that, holding hands, for a long moment. There was still much to say, many wounds to heal. But in that instant, I felt that a new beginning was possible. Not a return to what we were before, because neither of us was the same person, but something new, based on mutual respect, on recognizing each other's worth. You can stay here for a while, I finally said, until you find your footing, decide what you want to do. But there's one condition. What is it? She asked, anxiously. You're going to have to help me in the workshop. I have more orders than I can handle alone, I replied with a small smile. For the first time since she entered the house, Jamie smiled too. I would love to, Mum. I always thought it was beautiful watching you sew, even when I was little. There was something magical about seeing a plain piece of fabric transform into something beautiful in your hands. Those words, so different from the last ones she had directed at me, warmed my heart. Maybe there was hope for us, after all. In the weeks that followed, Jamie and I found a new rhythm together. She returned to the university, now determined to graduate and find a job that would allow her to gain her own independence. In her free time, she helped me in the workshop, discovering that she had inherited a little of my talent for crafts. Our relationship wasn't perfect. There were moments of tension, of awkwardness, when the memory of that terrible night came back to torment both of us. But little by little, we were building something new, something better, based on a deeper understanding of one another. One day, about 2 months after her return, Jamie came back from the university with an excited expression on her face. "Mum, you won't believe it. Remember Professor Monica from marketing that I told you about? She got super interested when I told her about your work. She said she wants to see it, that she can help expand the business, reach more customers." I felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Expanding meant more responsibility, more work, maybe more risks. But it also meant growth, fulfillment, the chance to transform even more lives with my art, including my own. "Do you think I should accept?" Jamie looked at me with a serious expression. "Mum, if there's one thing I learned in the last few months, it's that you can do anything you want. You just need to believe in yourself. I believe in you." Those words, coming from the same person who had one day called me a failure, meant more than she could ever know. Days later, I welcomed Jamie's professor into my home. Professor Monica was a middle-aged woman, elegant but without ostentation, with a sharp gaze that seemed to see possibilities where others only saw the obvious. She analyzed my creations with attention. She asked questions about my creative process, about my vision for the business. At the end of the visit, she made me a proposal. She would help me set up a small booth at a design fair that would be held in the city the following month. It was an opportunity to show my work to a larger, more diversified audience, potentially more willing to invest in quality artisanal pieces. "You have a gift, Rebecca," she told me, words I had heard from Mrs. Carroll months before, but which still moved me. "Your work has a sensibility, an authenticity that is rare nowadays. People look for that. They value that. They're willing to pay for that." I accepted the proposal. In the following weeks, Jamie and I worked tirelessly to prepare pieces for the fair. She helped not only with the production, but also with creating a more professional visual identity, organizing the catalogue, and defining the prices. The day of the fair arrived, and with it a nervousness I hadn't felt since that night I heard the sound of drawers opening violently. We set up our small booth, arranged our creations carefully, and waited for the doors to open with our hearts racing. The first few hours were slow. Some people stopped, looked, complimented, but moved on without buying. I started to doubt whether this had been a good idea, whether I was deluding myself into believing that my work could compete with that of professional designers, art school graduates, with years of experience. That's when she appeared. A tall, middle-aged woman, dressed simply, but with an air of someone who recognizes quality when she sees it. She stopped in front of our booth, examined each piece with attention, touched the fabrics, and analyzed the finishes. "Did you make all of this?" she asked directly. I nodded, a little intimidated. "Yes, ma'am." She smiled, a smile that lit up her clear eyes. "My name is Laura. I'm a curator for a collaborative shop in the downtown area of Los Angeles. We bring together works by independent artisans, emerging designers, artists who are looking for their place in the market." My heart pounded. I knew the shop she mentioned, not personally, but from photos on the internet. It was an elegant space, with a sophisticated clientele that valued quality craftsmanship. I'm always looking for talents like yours, she continued. People who make craftsmanship not only a way to earn a living, but a form of expression, of communication. Your work has soul, Rebecca, and that's rare nowadays. She offered me a space in the shop. It wasn't exclusivity. I could continue selling on my own, serving my direct customers. But it was an opportunity to reach an audience that I would hardly reach alone. In that moment, looking at the card that Laura handed me with the shop's address and her personal contact, I realized how far I had come since that night. From the insecure woman, humiliated by her own daughter, who cried secretly in her room, I had transformed into an entrepreneur, a recognized artisan, a woman who knew her worth and wasn't afraid to take up her space in the world. And the most incredible thing is that this transformation hadn't come from the outside in, from a bigger house, more expensive furniture, appearances, but from the inside out, from the discovery of my own potential, my own strength, my own capacity to reinvent myself. Jamie, who had watched the conversation with Laura, hugged me tightly when the woman walked away. "Mom, you did it. I knew you would." I returned the hug, feeling immense gratitude for life, for the trials that made me stronger, and yes, even for the pain of that night that had been the catalyst for everything. "We did it, honey," I corrected gently. "Together." Months passed since that day at the fair. My work can now be found not only in Laura's shop, but in 2 other similar spaces in neighboring cities. I have a small team working with me, 2 women from the neighborhood who, like me, were looking for a way to earn a living that allowed them to work from home, with flexible hours. Jamie is about to graduate from the university. She already has job offers, but she is considering following a different path, taking on the administrative and marketing side of our expanding business. Art at home is no longer just a hobby that turned into a source of income. It's a formal company, with a tax ID, with growth plans, with a vision for the future. Our house, the one that was once called stinky and a failure, is now frequently photographed for decorating magazines, design blogs, and social media pages specialized in crafts. Not because it's luxurious or ostentatious, but because it's authentic, welcoming, a true home that reflects the personalities of those who live in it. I still have the picture frame that broke that night. I fixed it, put a new glass in it, and it holds a prominent place on the living room shelf. It's a constant reminder that sometimes we need to break in order to rebuild ourselves, stronger, more authentic, more complete. As for Mrs. Elizabeth and Mark, I heard he is dating another young woman, the daughter of a wealthy family in the city. I sincerely hope that she doesn't go through what Jamie went through, that she has the strength to set boundaries, to maintain her dignity, not to be seduced by appearances at the expense of her own essence. And as for me, well, I discovered that a winner's home is not the one with the most expensive furniture or the most luxurious decor. A winner's home is the one where you can be authentically you, where your worth doesn't depend on what you have, but on who you are. Where every object tells a story of overcoming, of love, of personal growth. And most importantly, I discovered that a winner is not the one who has more, or the one who appears to be more. A winner is the one who knows their worth, who has the courage to reinvent themselves when necessary, who manages to transform pain into learning, rejection into motivation, failure into momentum to keep moving forward. On that terrible night, when Jamie slammed the door on her way out, I thought I had lost everything. I didn't know that in reality I was about to find myself, and that, believe me, was the greatest victory of all. Now, if you liked this story, click to subscribe and tell me in the comments what part left your jaw dropping. Oh, and don't forget to become a member for access to exclusive videos that I don't publish here. I'll see you there.